Hello and welcome to this NPTEL course on Foundations of Immersive Design for AR/VR. I am Dr. Amar Kumar Behera and I will take you on a 12-week journey on this course where you will learn about immersive design for augmented reality and virtual reality. So, this course will be taught as a 4-credit course starting on the 20th of July and ending on the 9th of October. You can reach me at the email mentioned on this slide. The enrollment ends on 27th of July, while the exam will be held on the 23rd of October. The exam registration ends on the 14th of August. Let us look at the aims of this course. This course will introduce foundational concepts of augmented reality, virtual reality and mixed reality. It will also help you develop a design oriented understanding of immersive spatial experiences. It will enable students to conceptualize, prototype and evaluate AR/VR experiences and enable you to cultivate critical awareness of ethical, social and experiential implications of immersive technologies. Let us look at the course structure and assessment now. This course is free to enroll and learn from, but if you want a certificate, then you need to register and write a proctored examination conducted by us in the designated exam centers in person. This exam is optional for a fee of rupees 1000 only. It will be held on the 23rd of October with 2 sessions. First will be the morning session from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock and the second will be the afternoon session from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. To get a certificate, you need an average assignment score of 25% from your best 8 out of 12 assignments that you will submit on this course, and your exam score will be 75% of the proctored score out of 100. So, your final score will be calculated as a sum of the average assignment score and the exam score. Please note that assignments encompass all types including quizzes, programming tasks and essay submissions available in the specific week. You will be eligible for a certificate only if your average assignment score is greater than or equal to 10 out of 25 and your exam score is greater than or equal to 30 out of 75. If one of the 2 criteria is not met, then you will not get a certificate even if the final score is greater than or equal to 40 out of 100. Now, let us look at the learning outcomes of this course. You will learn to understand and articulate core concepts of AR, VR and XR systems. You will learn to apply human centered design principles to immersive experiences. You will learn to design meaningful spatial interactions and narratives in AR, VR. You will learn to prototype and iterate AR, VR concepts using contemporary tools. You will learn to critically evaluate immersive experiences from usability, ethical and experiential perspectives, and you will learn to develop and present a comprehensive AR, VR technical design project. Now, let us look at the content week by week. In the first week, we will introduce the course, look at the learning outcomes, objectives and expectations, then move on to the overview of AR, VR and XR and then discuss history and evolution of immersive media. In the second week, we will start discussing fundamentals of AR, VR, XR systems, XR hardware platforms, sensors and display technologies. In the third week, we will talk about human perception in immersive environments, presence, immersion and embodiment, and we will also introduce you to spatial cognition. In the fourth week, we will discuss spatial design principles for AR, VR. We will look at interaction design techniques for immersive environments as well. Then in the fifth week, we will start talking about UI, UX paradigms for immersive systems and move on to narrative design, world building and experience flow. In the sixth week, we will discuss prototyping workflows for AR, VR and discuss different tools and platforms for XR design such as Unity, WebXR and Unreal Engine. In the seventh week, we will discuss game design concepts for XR and you will learn how to implement them in a studio environment and also implement mechanics in these games. In the eighth week, you will learn about asset creation and scene building. We will discuss interaction design and play testing in immersive environments. In the ninth week, we will talk about multimodal interaction that includes gaze, gesture, voice and haptics. We will discuss accessibility, comfort and safety in XR and we will also talk about ethics and societal impact of immersive technologies. In the 10th week, we will cover evaluation methods for AR/VR experiences and discuss case studies in education, training, healthcare and industry. In the 11th week, we will look at project concept development and review. We will also look at developing prototypes and user testing and iterative refinement. In the 12th week, we will talk about emerging trends in XR and immersive technologies, and we will also look at how to refine your final project, tell a story and give a presentation of your AR/VR project. We have planned this course as an intentional interdisciplinary cohort with people from engineering and technology, people from creative and media and also industry professionals. So, there will be various disciplines such as computer science, applications, architecture, design, animation, game design, all different kinds of engineers, industry professionals with backgrounds in manufacturing, education, healthcare, etc., who will be joining us in this course, and hopefully that will give you an interdisciplinary flavor where you get to talk with people from various walks of life. No prior AR/VR experience is required to join this course. Now, let us discuss the learning outcomes from today's lecture. Today's lecture will understand the concept of immersive technologies. We will differentiate between AR, VR, MR and XR. We will recognize major application domains of immersive systems. We will learn to appreciate the role of design in successful AR/VR experiences, and we will understand the structure and expectations of this course. So, formally welcoming you to the course, I would like you to think about 3 questions now. Have you ever used or played the game Pokemon Go? Have you tried on a VR headset in your life at an exhibition or a fair or at your home or at school, be it the MetaQuest or the Apple Vision Pro? Have you used virtual tours or digital twins? So, hopefully you have written down the answers to these questions, and that will shape your thinking as we move along this lecture. In today's journey, we will discuss 4 things. Firstly, what is immersive design? Secondly, what are AR and VR? Why do they matter at all? Why are we talking about it? Why are we planning to design for it? And so on and so forth. And of course, finally, how will this course help you? So, I will start with the next computing revolution. If we look at how interfaces that we use in our day to day life have evolved, we can see that in the 1980s, we had command line interfaces, where you start a command prompt and from the command prompt you give some commands, and those commands help you carry out different tasks on a computing system. Slowly, as the 90s came around, we had desktop graphical user interfaces. So, that was a shift from command lines, which were essentially black screens with command prompts, to something that had a graphical interface. And then in the 2000s, mobile phones started becoming popular. So, mobile apps started coming into being. In the 2010s, we started having touch on these mobile phones and other devices such as tablets and laptops, and we started moving towards cloud computing, where you could store your data on the cloud and compute on the cloud. Beginning in the 2020s, we have now moved into an era of what is known as spatial computing, and that has been enabled by the rapid growth in electronics as well as in display technologies, and that has enabled us to compute spatially rather than locally. So, computing is moving away from local screens to spaces, and that is what we call as spatial computing. So, we are moving beyond the 2-dimensional screen, we are transitioning from flat interfaces to spatial computing, and that requires mastering human perception and contextual enhancement. So, this comes in 3 flavors. We need the spatial computing technology, we need human centered interaction design, and we also need ethical and societal applications. So, when we combine all of them, we can then move away from the screen into spatial computing regimes. So, that helps us paint a day in an immersive future. Let us say 10 years from now, in the year 2035, where you might have surgeons who are using augmented reality guidance, as you can see in this AI generated illustration. You may have engineers collaborating in digital twins. So, you can see that in these illustrations here or here. You may have students who are learning inside virtual laboratories. You may have tourists who are experiencing historical reconstructions, or you may have designers who are prototyping products in virtual reality. Something for you to think about. Well, what makes these experiences different from traditional computing as you may have experienced it? Okay, so now let us talk about immersion, because that is one part of our course title. So, what we will be doing now is breaking down our course title and understanding every individual bit of it. So, as you recollect, the course is titled Foundations of Immersive Design for AR/VR. So, the first word that comes to our mind, that comes in the course title, is immersion. So, let us understand what immersion is. Immersion is something that occurs when users feel surrounded by a digital environment. Okay, that is what is immersion. You can see here the lady. Okay, so, she has put on some glasses and that transports her into another world where she is immersed and completely navigating a different reality than the physical reality she is living in. So, she feels surrounded because all of a sudden her eyes are covered by these glasses and all that she can see is what the display shows her, and she is cut off from the real world. So, there are some elements which create true immersion. One is visual engagement, which means your eyes must be completely engaged in the process of journeying into another world. You must also have your ears engaged, or audio engagement. You may be able to interact with the elements that you are seeing in your visual display. So, there might be some interaction and you are suddenly transported into this new world. So, you are present in this new world rather than the world which you are physically in. So, that is what causes immersion. Now, let us talk about virtual reality. It is true that the technology in virtual reality has been evolving rapidly. So, to define it is not such an easy task, and we would rather avoid defining it using specific devices. So, the current VR devices may be obsolete in a year and the technology may have transitioned to another level altogether. So, let us break down this word to understand this a little bit better. First, look at the word virtual in virtual reality. Okay. So, if we see the origin of the word virtual, it comes from virtue or late Latin, which is virtuosus, and it essentially means possessing certain virtues. The contemporary English definition of the word virtual is almost or nearly as described, but not completely or according to strict definition. It could also mean not physically existing as such, but made by software to appear to do so. Okay, so, hopefully, the word virtual is clear to you. The second word that comes in the term virtual reality is reality. So, that comes from late Latin word realis, which essentially translates to the English real or reality in the late 15th century onwards. The dictionary definition as we have today is the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to idealistic or notional idea of them. Now, you see the strange dichotomy here, the difference between the definition of virtual and that of reality. So, on one hand, virtual means not physically existing, whereas reality means the state of things as they actually exist. So, they seem to be opposites of each other. So, how do we then bring them together? So, there is a contradiction and we need to define VR properly. So, this term is actually quite old. It dates back to the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, although its use did not involve technology. Kant introduced the term to refer to the reality that exists in someone's mind, as differentiated from the external physical world, which is also a reality. The modern use of the VR term was popularized by Jaron Lanier in the 1980s. And to rectify this contradiction, some people have also tried using the word virtuality rather than virtual reality. So, maybe this can rectify the contradiction. However, VR has become popular and VR is in vogue. So, we will use VR throughout the course, but I want you to understand what the phrase actually means. Now, to understand VR a little bit more, we can take a step back into the past. So, some of you may recollect the Mahabharata TV series that appeared on national television in the 1980s and then has been retelecast several times. It was produced by B.R. Chopra. Here is a scene from this epic series, and this is essentially from the text of Mahabharata, which is an ancient text that is used in India, 6.15, and here there is the character of Sanjay who is guiding the character of Dhritarashtra, and here is what he says. He says, having bowed down to thy father Vedvyas, who is the author of Mahabharata, that wise and high souled son of Parasara, through whose grace I have obtained excellent and celestial apprehension, sight beyond the range of the visual sense, and hearing, O king, from great distance, knowledge of other people's hearts and also of the past and the future, a knowledge also of the origin of all persons transgressing the ordinances, the delightful power of coursing through the skies, and untouchableness by weapons and battles. Listen to me in detail as I recite the romantic and highly wonderful battle that happened within Bharatas, a battle that makes one's hair stand on end. So, here Sanjay is relating the narratives of the events that are occurring on the battlefield of Mahabharata through the blind king Dhritarashtra, whose sons the Kauravas are engaged in a battle with the Pandavas. And when this great battle is taking place in Kurukshetra, Sanjay is narrating the events through a mirror or a lens that is due to his gifted sight, that is enabling him to peep into the battlefield and journey through the battlefield and narrate it to the king Dhritarashtra. So, we can as well say that in some sense humans had already conceptualized virtual reality long ago. Now, let us look at an alternative definition of virtual reality. We can say that it is an act of inducing a targeted behavior in an organism by using some artificial sensory stimulation, while the organism has little or no awareness of the interference. Now, look at some of the key phrases in this definition. One is that of targeted behavior. So, we are looking at a specific behavior that we can induce in some organism, and how do we do it? Well, we use some artificial sensory stimulation. So, the nature of the stimulation of the senses is artificial, which is that it is not from the natural world, it is something artificial that we generate. And it is also important that while we are doing it, the organism has little or no awareness of this interference and is completely taken over and is able to replicate the desired or induce the desired targeted behavior. We can simplify this a bit further. We can say that virtual reality is actually a fully computer generated environment that replaces the physical world. Examples could be these sorts of headsets which you might have seen on television or elsewhere. So, here I have shown 3 headsets. One is the MetaQuest headset. This is a MetaQuest 3 at the bottom. Next to it you see the HTC Vive, and the third headset that you see here is the PlayStation VR. The characteristics of such headsets are that they give you complete immersion or close to complete immersion. They provide you an environment which is not the real environment you live in, but the virtual environment. They also give you the ability to interact spatially in this environment. That is, you can move around, navigate, do things in these environments yourself. It is not the same thing as watching a TV screen where things are being shown to you, but you cannot do anything about it. Next we move on to the next phrase, which is augmented reality. So, augmented reality is the last term in our course title. So, our course title being Foundations of Immersive Design for AR VR. We have talked about VR, which is virtual reality. Now, let us talk about augmented reality. Augmented reality is the process of overlaying digital content onto the physical world in real time. So, what it means is that we take our physical world, but we add information on top of it, which is digital in nature. So, digital content overlaid on top of the physical world creates augmented reality. So, the user in this case remains grounded in the real environment while interacting with virtual elements. So, you stay in the real world, you still have the awareness of the real world, but there are things that are added on into the real world, which are essentially digital content. So, what it does is it enhances our perception by adding contextual information such as images. You might add an image on top of the physical world, you might add text, animations or 3D objects. So, there are many common AR platforms and you might have come across some, especially if you have played the game which I mentioned earlier, which was Pokemon Go. So, these could be mobile phones, could be tablets, could be smart glasses, or it could be even HMDs or head mounted displays. So, various AR platforms may be used. So, the normal way, if you recollect some of these games, you might use your phone's camera to tell an app about the current world, and the app may add some digital content as you look through the camera. There is some digital content that is placed, and as you are looking at the phone screen, you can see that this content is now there in the real world. So, the same can be done with tablets. Equally, you can use smart glasses, which may also have a tiny embedded camera, which help you place this digital content on the real world. Now, let us talk about two other terms, which are mixed reality and extended reality. They do not figure in the course title, but they are also important to understand in this context. So, mixed reality is a term that talks about blending elements of both augmented reality and virtual reality. So, it is about blending AR and VR. So, virtual objects, if they are spatially anchored in the physical environment, but you can also interact with them. If you can interact with the virtual objects, that creates what is known as mixed reality. Now, extended reality or XR is an umbrella term that covers AR, VR, MR, all of them together. Now, designing for XR usually requires spatial context. So, AR, VR, MR, all of them. You also need to have what is known as embodiment, that is taking on another body or feeling the presence of another body, and interaction. So, you need to understand three things to be able to design for these sorts of AR, VR and MR environments, which is spatial context, that is how the space is laid out and how you interact with space, how you embody different objects in these alternative environments, and how you interact with these objects. So, having understood all these terms, now we can talk about a continuum of reality and virtuality. On one hand, we may have reality on the left and virtuality on the right. So, as we move from the real environment, which may consist of, let us say, human robot interfaces, and move into augmented reality, we have shifted a little bit away from the real environment. If we then move into adding other elements such as touch, gesture, etc., we may go closer to the virtual environment, which may be then called as AV or augmented virtuality, and the removal of complete presence in the physical environment gives you what is known as VR or virtual reality. So, Milgram and Kishino proposed this reality virtuality continuum, okay, and this continuum spans from real environments to fully virtual ones, and the intermediate ones are also captured in this continuum. So, augmented reality lies closer to the real world, whereas virtual reality lies at the opposite end. So, augmented reality consists of adding digital elements to your reality, whereas VR replaces the reality entirely. The in between space can be called as mixed reality, where physical and virtual elements coexist and interact. So, indeed your environmental awareness is more when you are in reality, and slowly as you move into augmented reality, your environmental awareness reduces, and as you get into the virtual environment, your digital immersion is the highest. So, AR consists of digital overlays on the physical space. Augmented virtuality consists of physical objects brought into virtual space. VR is complete digital immersion, where you forget about the real world, and real environment where you are moving around today consists of zero digital immersion. Now, let us briefly touch on the core components of AR VR systems. Typically, we need 4 things. We need the hardware, we need some software, we need some content, and we need some users. In terms of hardware, you may have displays, you may have sensors, you may have controllers and tracking systems. In terms of software, you may have game engines, you may have rendering pipelines and interaction frameworks. As we move on this course, we will talk about the various types of software tools that you can use. We will also look at the different hardware that we can use. I will bring some hardware to show to you, and then we will also need 3D models, the digital content which will be processed by the software and laid into the hardware or in the physical world. So, that will consist of 3D models, different environments that we create, narratives that we create, and interactions that we may have. Of course, all of this is useless without any users who are the targeted organisms. So, in our case, it will be the human perception that we are targeting, the human cognition, our thinking abilities, and our behavior. Okay. So, this is critical to the design decisions we make when we are creating these AR VR systems. Now, let us talk about why designers matter and why we have titled this course as immersive design and not just immersion. Well, that is because these experiences need to be created, need to be planned, thought through. So, AR VR experiences are fundamentally experiential and human centered. So, we need to capture them, and for that we need designers. If we do not design these environments well, it can lead to various issues such as discomfort, confusion, or motion sickness. Designers can help shape the spatial interaction that is required for virtual reality and augmented reality. They can help tell stories, they can create the emotional engagement that is required to actually fully immerse yourself in these environments. So, we have an ethical responsibility as well when we are creating, and that is where designers also come in, because designers can take up the ethical responsibility, which is critical due to the immersive nature of these technologies, and because they can transport you to another world and detach you from the reality that you are currently in, that can lead to various knock on effects for you as the targeted organism. In terms of the applications of augmented reality and virtual reality, they have applications in education and training, in healthcare, in industry, in culture and entertainment. In education and training, AR VR has been used for simulations, for skill development and experiential learning. In healthcare, VR and AR have been used for therapy, rehabilitation, training doctors for surgery, mental health, and so on and so forth. In the industry, it is often used for visualizing designs, creating models in 3D, interacting with models, maintaining various equipment, training operators, safety training of people who work on the shop floor, and so on and so forth. In culture and entertainment, AR VR has been used for games, for exploring museums, telling stories from the past, present and future, and performances. So, what is immersive design that we are talking about? It is all about creating and designing these meaningful experiences in the virtual domain that integrate people, spaces, technologies and interactions. So, 4 things: people, spaces, technologies and interactions within virtual and augmented environments. Typically, this has 4 components. One is the user, second is the environment, the third is the interaction, then the fourth is a story, and it also has a technology that links them all together. Our immersive design framework can be thought of as having 4 pillars. One is that of the perception that we have, that is what we are manipulating through AR VR, the spatial experiences we have, the interaction design that needs to be between the human and the new environment, the virtual environment or the augmented environment, and the technological implementation. So, there are 4 big pillars that we need to think about when we are designing for AR VR. All of these are built into the structure of this course. So, I have laid out once again the various phases of this course. In the first 2 weeks, we look at hardware platforms, sensors, XR systems. Then we move on to perception, spatial cognition and the psychology of presence. Week 4, we talk about spatial design principles and interaction techniques. Then phase 2 is from weeks 5 to 8, consisting of UX paradigms, narrative flows, game design mechanics and Unity scene building. Weeks 9 and 10, we talk about interaction and ethics, that includes multimodal inputs, accessibility and rigorous evaluation methods. Finally, we synthesize it all together in weeks 11 to 12. Okay, so, this is your phase 2 and this here is your phase 3. So, all of this stitches together story that takes you from spatial prototypes to a product that is ethical and can hopefully be used in the real world. So, your early weeks will focus on concepts, perception and design principles. Midway through the course, you will gain expertise in tools, interaction and 2D game studios. Then the later weeks will focus on evaluation, ethics and advanced applications and culminate in a comprehensive exam. By the end of this course, you will be able to analyze immersive experiences, design XR interactions, prototype AR VR applications and evaluate user experiences. You will also be able to develop industry ready XR concepts. There are plenty of opportunities that lie ahead for you, which could be as an XR designer or an AR developer or a VR developer or an experience designer, could work as a spatial computing designer, as a digital twin specialist or a metaverse strategist. So, there are various roles waiting for you once you have completed this course, and these jobs are quite sought after in today's job market. What I expect from the students is curiosity and openness to emerging technologies, willingness to experiment, prototype and iterate, active participation in discussions and critiques, and critical reflection on technology, society and the impact you will have as a designer. To wrap up, I would like you to think like a designer and choose a domain such as education, healthcare, manufacturing or tourism, and think about how could AR VR improve the experience in one of these domains that interests you. Okay. So, something to do before the next lecture. Finally, to summarize this lecture, indeed extended reality or XR is transforming computing as we know it. AR and VR provide different forms of immersion to users, VR being completely shut off from physical reality and AR being overlying content on the physical reality, being closer to physical reality and VR being the most distanced from physical reality. Design is central to immersive, creating these successful immersive experiences. So, you need to think about your role as a designer of these systems. What is also essential is putting the human at the center of your design thinking, and that will help you create the best possible experiences in AR VR. What this course will do is that it will provide you the foundation for a successful career in the field of extended reality. Here are some books that you may want to look at as you progress through this course. These are also mentioned on the course website. So, with this we conclude this lecture. There is much to look forward to in the next lecture, where we will talk about the history and evolution of immersive media. We will talk about early immersive systems, the birth of VR, some milestones in the AR journey and the VR journey, and the evolution towards spatial computing. With this, I conclude this opening lecture of this course, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture. Thank you.